All right, today I'll introduce our topic, institutional knowledge as an asset. So this is an applied AI topic. So we're talking about how the knowledge within your organization can be utilized to help drive your organization forward and thinking about it from an application perspective. My name's Adam. I'm our CTO. So my role is leading a team of purposefully varied backgrounds to help our clients and prospects make decisions, be strategic about what their IT and software spend, and help them implement either products for their clients or Microsoft Cloud solutions for themselves, and do so as not a hammer looking for a nail, but really trying to understand the problem and pick the right solution for the problem. I'm joined by one of my team members, Josh, who's a very experienced software engineer and architect. Josh is leading our AI initiative here with Encompass and is one of our primary experts on the topics. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Adam.
Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please feel free to submit questions or comments via the chat. Love to get input from you as you go through and help answer questions. But from here, we'll move on and kind of jump right into the webinar today. So we're going to divide this up into three different groups and topics here. We're going to go through a little bit of an intro and kind of define what institutional knowledge as an asset really means, the applications, and a little refresher around generative AI, as well as kind of some thought experiments. Then we're really going to dive into the process of an applied generative AI project or solution. So we'll get into the details of how that would actually work. And then we're going to go through a few use cases and see how we actually implemented those. All right. So just as a quick refresher, as we think about AI, there are multiple types of AI. That definition, much like cloud, is a pretty generic term. So we are specifically talking about predominantly generative AI in today's discussion. And it's when most people talk about AI today, a lot of times they are referring to generative AI. And that is the chat GPTs of the world. It's based on traditional AI. It's all statistical in nature, but it has applied some new techniques that have essentially made this possible. So you think about ChatGPT specifically 3.5 and 3.4 and now 4.0, and who knows what before that transformer model was a big step, and so that's unlocked a lot of different things. When we talk about applied AI, then we get, and again, generative AI. How do we use the paradigms and the underlying large language models from GPT-4 and the like? We're talking about some architectures that we consider, we colloquially call that RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and that architecture has, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but that architecture has a pattern that we largely follow that includes different ways to configure either orchestration or knowledge or ingestion agents, etc., to ultimately get us better answers depending on the scenario. So in that case, we are just like we would with a traditional software project. We're understanding the problem, and we're going through a process of defining a solution that matches the need, budget, criticality, etc. And so if we think about the three areas, kind of big areas that generative AI can help us in, it's, we know this already, content generation, right? It generates content that we've asked it for. And that nowadays, that's text, images, code, video, voice, all kinds of things. And remember that language is lots of things. Code is a language. Different ways that we interact with different systems can be a language. So there's a lot of, kind of details of what that can be. Data synthesis and augmentation. So think about uploading. If you go to ChatGPT, you put a PDF in there, and it can synthesize that data, it can vectorize that, and then it can maybe answer questions about that, or it can enhance a document, or enhance say you put in the email structure that you want, and you ask it to actually generate the email, so it can augment what you've already produced by a synthesis. Additionally, it can contextualize. So we may give it may have a language or some kind of input, and we'll give examples of this later, but we may want to convert that into some structured data. So scoring or something like, so we can contextualize that. We can convert unstructured data into structured data, and then use traditional techniques. And then additionally, it's just another user experience to enhance the way that we interact with our software, right? Sometimes a visual approach is the best way. Sometimes maybe a text or a voice or some other type of approach can be the best way to interact with the software that we have and the solutions we have. So this gives us another way to do that. So what is institutional knowledge? Before we get into that, I'd like to think about, if you think about all of the we'll just use clients as an example. If you think, because we've thought about this ourselves for Copus, if we think about all of the interactions that you have with your clients, and maybe that's email, that's CRM, that's your account managers, that's all of the data that you could collect on your interactions with your clients, how much of that survives beyond that interaction, right? There's knowledge, and we have a meeting, and maybe we transcribed it, maybe we don't, but there's knowledge that's even being created in the heads of our people interacting with our clients. And as they come up with ideas for that client, there could be the transcripts, it could be various forms of interactions that maybe even siloed information that happened, that knowledge, it's probably a pretty sharp curve that actually survives that interaction. And so you think about how much is lost that beyond that maybe we're not capitalizing on as organizations. So that could be best practices, that could be procedures. Maybe we ad hoc come up with a procedure, or we adjust a procedure because of what we've witnessed. All that historical data, think about, again, a customer, but then employee expertise and undocumented know-how, the information that we know that how to run a particular area of the business or machine. And so a lot of that information is locked up in silos, and we've as groups of companies, we've tried to unlock a lot of that data, either through documentation or think about all of the data warehousing. A lot of those projects are designed to break down those silos, but there's a whole area of information that's maybe unstructured that maybe isn't being broken down as well as it could have. So think about, again, that back to that lost knowledge. So I think we all have faced over especially the last 4 or 5 years, employee turnover and knowledge loss from that siloed information. Teams as an example, or other type of Slack, those types of tools, email, have increased the frequency of communication. But those two tools in general, if used in specific ways, like directing answers or questions to individuals, when that's a silo in and of itself, right? And so we need discipline in order to solve that, but maybe there are other ways. And then there's definitely key individuals, right? As our organizations grow, knowledge and those employees do amazing things to help our businesses grow. That knowledge begins to sort of pile up in their minds, and sometimes they can be as much as they've helped us get to that place, they can become bottlenecks because that knowledge resides within their mind. And so that can cause operational disruptions, maybe client experience problems, delays, training struggles, onboarding costs, maybe struggle with following procedures, and even strategic missteps. So the application of this can be pretty great. So what would they, what would things, what could we do, and how would it actually improve, again, mitigating that risk that you have a poor experience with your customer or other, lost revenue, increased cost issues. We can enhance our efficiency. I think as we look at how we implement generative AI solutions and the application of that, I think definitely thinking about it almost as you would a low code type of implementation with something like the Power Platform. That's the kind of like small ways to layer in AI into how you solve problems, because they're quick wins and you can continue to build upon them and iterate quickly. And it does work really well in very specific scenarios. So not trying to solve knowing everything about our client, but maybe knowing this piece about our client, or kind of building that all up until you have ultimately a great way to get out that. I think we're seeing that more and more companies are investing into these types of technologies, and so being able to move quickly and then eventually outpace your competitors is going to be places where the investment really pays off. So if we think about where this can be applied, that adaptability and the agility, thinking about this from a low code perspective and solving smaller pieces around this quickly. This is a technology that can provide value in a quick way, and then we can iterate from there to continue to grow, thinking about it from a product or portfolio perspective. From an innovative perspective, it solves different problems, right? We are able to do things that we weren't able to do, or it was very difficult to do with traditional techniques. And so this unlocks a whole new avenue that we can utilize to create innovative solutions. And if you think about to our thought experiment, the only way we will be able to scale the knowledge that we need to manage as organizations is with a technology like this. The pace of data generation and knowledge generation that is going on both at a macro level within your industries, as well as an internal and micro level within your organization, it just can't keep up. We have to change. We have to tilt the scale in our favor. This has the ability to completely change the way we engage with our customers and be extremely knowledgeable about them and really cater to their needs. And it definitely has the ability to enhance our decision making, giving us more access to the data we need to make those decisions. But we have to make it accessible, right? And so as we think about how we make this data accessible, the easiest way to entry is in products like Copilot. Copilot's a brand and also used largely in the industry, but within the Microsoft space, Copilot is a brand of technology and products that make it easy to access information within your Microsoft technologies and the experience within Microsoft. But going beyond that, creating tailored solutions, whether within chat, maybe hooking into Copilot, or a direct chat experience with like a chat GPT style interface, maybe in your tenant, tailoring a solution to specific needs with a chat experience. That's another way to make generative AI accessible to your teammates. And lastly, don't forget to flip it on its head. This is a tool just like all the other tools, and there are existing workflows that you can plug this into and have a step that is a generative AI step. So you don't have to go make a full-on generative AI application. We can utilize it for what it's really great at and build that into our existing workflows. And we'll show an example of that here a little bit later. But ultimately, we'll go through this, and the next section will be, we've got to pull data in, we've got to understand the solution and orchestrate an answer, and we have to make it accessible to our team. So from here, we're going to go a little bit into the process. So Josh is going to go through a lot of the steps that we would go through in a pilot or a project to launch a generative AI app or a specific use case. And then we're going to flip into we've got 3 real-world use cases that we're going to walk through, ranging from very simple into more complex. Josh?
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Yep, thank you. So I think with an AI project, any project, you want to start with planning. And it's important to consider your budget and your timeline, certainly, but I'm going to focus on pretty much just the implementation of the project. And I think one of the first things that you're going to want to do is identify the pain. So this may be something like it takes too long to respond to customer support requests. It could be something like our internal process documentation is scattered and it's hard to navigate and find the answers for what we're looking for at any given time. So once you have a really clear understanding of what the pain is that you're trying to solve, that may seem simple, but during that process, some additional context may come up. You may clarify between various stakeholders or interested parties that we're all on the same page and that we're all trying to solve the same problem. So that's a very important step, even though it may seem simple. The next step is to identify the stakeholders. You want to identify each of them, interview them, again, helping drive home that we're all focused on solving the same problem and that we have the same goal in mind. I think it's also important and sometimes overlooked to interview the end users of the solution, because they're the ones that are actually going to be impacted by this on a day-to-day basis in interacting with it. So it's very important to talk to them and get feedback from them on what are their pain points in their day-to-day in this area, and do they have feedback or sessions that you can incorporate into the solution. Once you've done that, I think it is also important to identify your success criteria. So when the solution is complete, by what metrics are we going to define success? And I think establishing metrics here is very important. You also want to take the time to understand your security requirements and privacy requirements. Obviously, when we're gathering data and vectorizing it or making it available to the AI, you're going to be gathering lots of information, and some of that potentially could be sensitive. So to discuss that, classify the different kinds of data that you're going to be collecting, and understand what the security requirements are around each of those classifications is very important. You also want to understand scalability, just like any other project, but that's pretty important in the world of AI because of rate limits on the models, context limits, and these sorts of things. You want to have a good understanding of how many calls are we going to make to the model, what that cost looks like, and what the concurrent user base looks like to make sure that your setup can support it. Then you want to think about other systems that you may end up needing to integrate with for the full solution. So this could be something like HubSpot or some other ticketing system or Teams, Outlook, various integration points that you may have in the overall solution. And then really just getting down to planning out exactly what that solution is going to look like. Step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. So once you've gone through that process, it's very likely that you'll have identified various sources of data that you'll need to collect to vectorize and make accessible for the solution. Some of the examples of the type of information that you're probably going to want to collect could be meeting transcripts. This could be with customers so that we are tracking and not losing any information from meetings with customers. This could be, we'll talk about this example later, but this could be in the scenario that Adam laid out where you have a knowledge expert. This could be that you go through a series of interviews and record those interviews and create transcripts with that person and then vectorize them, because that could be a very powerful source of data for the AI solution. You also want to look at your general documentation that you have inside of the organization. What is our organization about? Processes, what processes do we have? Making sure that we surface that information can help build gateways in and help make sure that the process is really following and flowing in a way, because as we all know, you can have documentation, but if nobody's following, then it's not very helpful. You probably also, another good source of information that you may want to index would be customer details. So when you are building a solution, it's great to understand how your organization does things, but it's also probably going to be really great to understand who are key contacts with the customer. What does their environment look like? What kind of technologies or any deviations from your average customer? Having that stuff documented and accessible can go a long ways to building a really powerful solution. Same thing with like support tickets and emails. Again, just gathering as much information about your process and your organization and indexing it. The more information you can make available to the model, the better. And that could include code repositories. If you're building a solution to help your development team, you could look at indexing parts of your code repositories or code documentation and making that available to your developers alongside something like Copilot for GitHub. Once you've gathered that information, it's going to be really identified and gathered that information. It's going to be really important to look at curating that data and making sure that, okay, I have all this information, but is it all right? Right. So you could have inaccurate information or stale information. So you wrote some document 3 or 4 years ago, but your organization has evolved and your process has evolved over that time, and maybe there's some out-of-date information over there. Doing a manual review of that, as well as in some cases using AI to help identify some places that there may be some kind of discrepancy there, can also be helpful. Again, you should have already identified your security and privacy concerns, but making sure that you're taking the time to really have a really good handle on the information that's being indexed and how it's being grouped and what the authorization processes around accessing that information look like. You want to organize and categorize that information. It's going through this process, you've probably gathered a lot of information, and it's not helpful to just put it all in one big bucket and then ask the process to search in that one big bucket. You really want to categorize each step of information. This is our general process information. This is customer specific information. This is example support tickets that we worked in the past. These sorts of things, it's very important to categorize them so that when we're building a workflow, we're able to target specific types of information so that we can make good decisions around those pieces. Another good thing to add here would be response examples. So in the same way that when you train AI, you feed in input and then you show it what the expected output could be or should look like. When you're doing a RAG implementation, it's also very helpful to give the model some examples of what you want the output to look like. So making all of that accessible and having a really good handle on the information that you're surfacing is very important. So then at that point, you've planned, you've gathered your data, you've curated your data, and you want to start orchestrating a solution. That orchestration process could look very different depending on what problem you're actually solving. So the points on this slide are sort of an example of what that process may be like in some cases. And I think a lot of these steps are really going to apply to 80% of the solutions that you would look at. So the gather data here is not about the process we took during planning when we were gathering all the information that we need and indexing it. This is about once we've asked the AI model a question or our solution a question, what process does it go collect data in that RAG implementation? So the retrieve part of RAG. And this is why it's important to categorize the information so that you're very targeted about what types of information you're gathering and you have smaller pools of data to search through. Once the process has gathered the information, again, in this example, it's a really good idea to have another step of the documents that it's gathered and double checks to make sure that it's relevant to the question being asked and that it's going to be helpful in producing an answer. Because you may get some semantic search results back in the gather data part that aren't exactly directly related to the question. So having an additional step to filter out anything that may have been pulled in that will not be as helpful goes a long way to producing good results. Once you have information and collected it all, then a process could grade the whole of that information. So we've already went through and we filtered out individual documents, but now taking a step back and looking at all of the information that's been gathered and making sure that, yeah, this looks like there's enough information here to try to generate an answer and push through the solution. And I think it's important to talk about that each one of these steps here don't necessarily need to be that complicated. They could be just a simple model call that says, here's a document and here's a question, grade, give a 1 through 10 score on how useful this document is to produce an answer. It could not even be a model. It could just be some math equation. It could be just some logical, simple step 1, 2, 3. And the real key is that we're orchestrating all these very simple functions and tools together in a way that builds a powerful solution. So going back to the points, once you've graded the data and had a process that says, yes, we have enough information here to generate an answer, then you want to generate a draft answer. Again, in this example, once you've done that generation, it's also good to run through it again and double check. Okay, well, this is the answer that we produced the first time. This is the question that the user asked or the problem that we're trying to solve. Now let's have the AI grade itself, essentially, on how good of a job that it's done. And if it's done a good job, we can advance to the next step. And if it's not, we can circle back around to the gather data step and go back through the process again, maybe slightly tweaking what the prompts are in that process so that we can gather different sources of information and try again to build a better answer. Yeah, and so at that point, maybe you've done a loop or two to tweak the question and the result, and then have the AI model grade that final draft, and it says, yes, this looks like we can get a good answer here, or again, going back into the loop. So that's just sort of an example of what the workflow may look like for orchestrating a solution. So once the workflow, or maybe even within the workflow, you're going to want to put some checks in to have a human step in. It's great to have the AI check itself, but it's much more helpful to have a human, and everybody feels that sort of warm feeling inside to have a human step in and say, yeah, this looks good or it doesn't. So I think in lots of solutions, it's going to make sense to have checks or gateways along the way where a human approves the generation. Maybe the human is able to modify the generation and then feed that back into the system so that in the future we're able to produce answers that look more like what the accepted response is. So that can be a very powerful process that you generate, have a human modify the generation, feed that back into the loop, next cycle through, hopefully we get a better answer because we've already incorporated that feedback. So from that point, I'd like to also talk about different ways that you could integrate that output. Adam mentioned before that AI can be sort of separate from workflow. It's just a tool in the workflow. Every solution that we create doesn't have to be completely AI driven from front to back. AI can just be a piece of an existing workflow or a new piece in an existing workflow to improve the efficiency or accuracy of that process. And then, so you could have an existing system that we're integrating AI steps into that workflow to improve it. You could source that information for your employees. So going back to the example of a person that has a lot of knowledge within your organization has become a bottleneck, indexing that information, going through a process similar to the example that I laid out before, going through that can help share that knowledge throughout your organization and also make sure that people within your organization are aligning the processes because we can very easily surface process information to people within your organization so that they don't have to go hunt down, okay, well, this is what this process looks like. It's much easier to say, I'm on step one, I want to go to step two, or what else do I need to do to go on? AI can be really powerful in that way. And then to give like a more concrete example, you could use something like Power Automate to do issues. So a support ticket comes into your system, Power Automate picks that up, calls into an AI workflow that generates some example response for that support request, and then feeds that back up to a gate where an end user can say, or an internal user can say, yes, this looks like a good answer, or no, and tweak the answer, feed it back into the system. So yeah, that's just an example of what the process may look like when building an AI solution.
So from here, we're going to take a quick look at a few examples. We'll talk through the problem that we were trying to solve. So going back to the kind of prep work that Josh mentioned in the workflow and the process of launching an AI project, but then also talk through, here's what we actually did. Why did we do that? And then maybe even expound on that. What could we do? So if we think about the first scenario, the problem we were trying to solve, or the problem that was presented to us, was on average, we have very discrete and disparate ways to measure customer sentiment, customer satisfaction, right? As many organizations, we can send out surveys, we can have account managers ask and make a subjective observation there. And so those, let's say we had a scenario where there was a ranking that was less than what we wanted. So this could be any organization, we triage that, we put a plan in place to change that, and then how do we probably don't see that results or the change, we don't have a continuous scale, right? And so how can we get closer to that continuous scale of sentiment analysis? And this kind of goes into the, can we contextualize something? So that was the problem that we set out to solve there. And so this is one of our simpler examples. So in this case, we really just, on a receipt of an email, this as an example of one of the, embed this into an existing workflow or use Power Automate to do more low code, can we simply get a sentiment analysis on that email from a customer and then update, add a record into a customer satisfaction history table? So simple as that. We just want a closer to continuous data. We'll probably have lots of, noise in there, and we can over time do things to adjust that noise, but it's a little bit closer than the very disparate recording pieces from there. So that's an example of an easier one. Josh, what are ways that we can take that easy one then and kind of iterate from there?
Right. So once you've extracted that customer satisfaction value from unstructured data, you could do something like feed that value back into your CRM system. You could begin looking at other interactions with the customer and scoring those and looking at that information alongside your customer satisfaction information and getting some insight into how your customers respond to various interactions and surfacing that information for further analysis. You could also do something like automating interventions with the customer. If you can see that and detect that the customer satisfaction rate is dropping rapidly or from some interaction, then maybe you can automatically be notified of this and get involved with the customer and try to rectify that situation and improve that relationship.
Awesome. Yeah, and a lot of that is actually even back into the standard type of programming, that low code, et cetera. So not a total AI solution. It's a part of the solution.
That's right.
Another one that that we came across and this one's definitely internal to Copus, but also other companies like Copus and distributors face this type of challenge. The amount of information that the various partners who produce software, say for the Dynamics world, is incredibly high. And the amount of information they have about their own products, let's just even take Microsoft as an example, they have tons of documentation about, say, Business Central. And a lot of that is online in Microsoft Learn. There's a lot of information that comes to the partner. There's a lot of information that's publicly announced. There's information that comes through distributors, and some of it's pretty hefty information. And so for somebody or an organization it's a challenge for organizations to keep up with that. As information becomes stale, maybe promotions change, or the way that Business Central operates changes as they launch now twice a year. So those types of things can be tough for organizations to keep up with. And so providing an advisor that can quickly give answers to team members on a variety of topics in and around licensing was a problem that we set to solve for ourselves. And so kind of maybe Josh talk about that, and I could talk a little bit about some results and where we could go from there.
So as far as this goes, I think again, it's bringing your institutional knowledge in making it accessible in natural language type of patterns, so that we can help bring that information about licensing in this case easily accessible and navigate and easy to navigate way. Um, and I think we can also look at like a feedback loop so that, and I touched on this earlier, so that when we are producing responses or answers, we're able to grade those things and improve those things and feed those back into the system, improving.
Yeah, I think a key one in here is much like other places, you know, uh, if we ask a question, if somebody outside of the licensing department asks a question because they're trying to solve something for one of our clients, there may be key pieces of information that it can be a complex scenario. And so, as we talked about earlier, making sure that licensing has visibility into the questions and maybe even are approving answers. Those are some of the things that we've talked about in the beginning. We've given visibility to licensing so they can see what's being asked and then participate in that discussion. But one of the cool things that we've seen as we've tweaked this and changed the algorithm piece is the resulting behavior from. So I'm actually a user of this. So the resulting behavior is that when I have an interaction with a vendor, a partner who enhances Business Central, for instance, the probability that I document that that interaction or the information that we gleaned from that interaction has gone way up, because I know and I feel confident that the next time somebody asks that a question around that we will get an answer that will help the team. I've seen it when I put information into that repository and we re-index it. The answer we've now been able to answer questions that we previously couldn't answer. So we're actually seeing the results of this, and it's giving us confidence and it's changing behavior. The documentation just doesn't sit there, and it was wasted effort to create it and it got stale. This is happening, and it's improving. But as I think about, again, from a user perspective, where could we go from here? We have all types of interactions with our vendors, emails, transcripts, tons of information being exchanged there that can continue to go into that repository. So as Josh mentioned, connecting to what are the integrations? Those are two obvious places that we could continue to ingest information. And then these partners are constantly sending information our way and automating the workflow to have a proactive conversation with our clients about a relevant partner update. This is a manual effort, and that's the AMs and the solution architects having good account management. But we can make their load a little bit easier if we actually can have good information about the client, about their, or sorry, I should say, ingest the information that we already have about the client, the types of products that they use, what they've shared with us in the past, and feed that to the solution architects and the AM so that they can raise their hand, be armed with the information, be knowledgeable from licensing, and then go have a really good conversation with clients. So they're reacting quickly. So tons of the Dynamics world tends to have a lot of partners involved in delivering that solution, and being super knowledgeable about that is part of the value that we bring to our clients there. And so enhancing that has been helpful. All right. So this scenario is around that key individual who, over time, again, has helped bring the organization to where it is. But now, as the organization has matured, has most of that information, and so helping become less of maybe a single point of failure, and, and kind of upskilling the rest of the organization to help solve the types of scenarios that that person knows. Think if somebody knows how to work different areas of a manufacturing line, and these are maybe old machines, and so that knowledge being in that person's head, that they just have to tweak this little. They tighten this, it eventually gets loose a little bit, and if they just tighten this, and boom, we're back to normal. Those types of little, even nuggets of information, go a long way to helping the organization kind of reduce that single point of failure. So, Josh, what kind of talk through how you guys went through this and some of the results you're seeing?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. This is a very similar process to the example that I laid out before. And in this case, Richard has a ton of knowledge, and it's been accumulated over 20 years or more within the organization, and is also very broad. So infrastructure information, process information, coding information. He's a full stack developer, and he knows a lot and has gathered that information over a long time. So how do we make that accessible to everybody so that, one, it's easier to get to that information, two, God forbid something ever happened and we lose access to that information, it's not lost, because as great of a job as he does at documenting things, certainly there's just knowledge there that we don't want to lose. So going through that process, we went and identified all the best sources of information that has been documented, and augmented that information with interviews with Richard, with the expert, and creating transcripts of those interviews, as well as looking at all the different support requests that we've encountered. We limited that window to, over the last 5 years. Going back more than 5 years may not be as helpful. The system changes a lot over time. So looking at that information and looking at the policies, we index that information and then make it available to be incorporated into an AI workflow. Once we gathered that information and made it available, the process looked very much like I described earlier, with sort of being sistered to a Power Automate flow, so that when new support tickets are created, it would kick off a flow that would look at the request in the support ticket, and then go look at previous support tickets that have been executed on, emails, transcript information, company process information, customer specific information, sort of a lot of the same buckets that I laid out before. To being able to have all of that information categorized and available allows us to pull really targeted information based on what that support request is coming in. Once we have that information, we can, again, grade it, filter out any information that may have been erroneously pulled in, draft a response, and then, again, with the Power Automate flow attached to it, surface that draft of a response to our expert through Teams or Outlook. I mean, we could do it either way, but through Teams, and then have him adjust the answer. Look at the answer, approve it. Maybe it's perfect, doesn't need any modifications. Maybe there's a tweak here or there. We want to capture that tweak. We want to feed it back into the system, so and mark it as the approved answer, and grade it in a way so that it has a higher weight when we're pulling sources of information in the future. So doing something like that is very helpful to respond to support requests quickly, and to make that response consistent and information, and to free up our internal resources to do other important things. So that's very helpful. One of the other things that we did was we went through this process of gathering the information and curating it and all these steps. How else can we leverage it outside of just support tickets? So we also built a chat bot around that information so that internal users can just go ask questions. So this may not be support ticket driven. They may just have a question that came up in their day to day. They can go ask the Hey Richard chatbot about about their question and get a really good response back. And that's just the beginning of it. I mean, we have plans to take this further and further. There's lots of power being unlocked by having that information indexed and available in various workflows in new ways and exciting ways, in different ways than we could before.
Anything in particular you're excited about in the what's next?
In the what's next, I would say that in continuing to improve the feedback system, continuing to create metrics around the generated answers so that we can compare and see the progress of the system as it improves. I think to me, that is a very exciting place. And then eventually just building more automation on top of it. So that, again, not only are we addressing support tickets in a more efficient way, but also continuing to automate processes within the organization based off different interactions. And there's lots of places that AI can be plugged into those workflows to improve them.
Yeah, I think about even the access of data, right? We to simplify things in the pilot, we picked 5 years, but for different problems that may change what's relevant. And so I think automating that data curation and the grading can certainly even improve those answers because they'll be more relevant the closer maybe the time is.
That's right. Yeah, it'll help us identify. There could be holes in our documentation or in any process's documentation. So using AI to help identify those holes or conflicts is very powerful and really right in line with types of problems that generative AI can help solve.
Well, maybe let's move on a little bit to, I know we've got one question in here. So for an organization who hasn't invested in AI yet, which of these examples, or is there a good starting point to somebody who's brand new to this? Like, what would be a good tailored or a problem that would be a good initial tailored AI solution? And maybe even talk a little bit about, roughly what does that look to launch in a pilot?
Yeah. So my opinion on this would be a very general, without more specifics, a very general and easy to wrap your head around solution is something like a chatbot, right? So going through that data gathering process that I talked about, categorize the data, and then make it available to a chatbot. And then what we've done internally is build a system where sort of similar to GPTs, if people are familiar with it, but where we can have different personas that can have different tasks, and those personas can have access to different tools or sources of information, and that helps you tailor a persona to a very specific information or to a very specific problem set. And so that's a really generic and easy way that I think lots of businesses will be able to leverage their institutional data, is just through a chatbot and very well categorized and curated information.
Yeah, starting small. So another question that came in was, are AI projects a big lift for the IT teams? Do you have advice on how to get all stakeholders on board? I maybe take a initial crack. I think it can be, and it depends. So maybe, and Josh, keep me honest here, but from an infrastructure perspective, like what we did initially, all deployed on Azure. So from a management perspective, fairly lightweight. We have gone after things that are uh, the information is available within groups of people, and so it's very easy from a security perspective to say yes or no. So we've identified, and so we've kind of on purpose carved out like, okay, this is a more involved problem to solve, or this is, and so we've lowered the say the investment from the IT team to 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 deploy and monitor, and additionally, Josh and your team have built a lot of these to be templated. So the next time we want to go get information from SharePoint, great, it's easy. We make a tool based on your template off this library, and it becomes a plugin for maybe this persona. So what I've witnessed with what you've done internally, it, it doesn't feel like it's a pretty heavy lift from either a coding perspective or the IT management perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly from the IT management perspective, from a coding perspective, I think it matters a lot about what your internal development staff may look like. There's new concepts here. It can be a little difficult to wrap your head around coding with like semantic functions versus deterministic ones. So it can take you a little bit to wrap your head around there. But from an IT perspective, or organizational IT perspective, not a lot of lift there, except for if you're in a very security sensitive area, right?
Yeah,
so
clients.
If you're in that world, you already know the complexities and how difficult, or at least how thorough you have to be when navigating that world. So it's not really introducing anything new to those types of organizations, but it makes it very important when you're gathering information that you're classifying it correctly, that you understand what information is in those buckets of classification, and that you have some authorization process around it that makes sure that users aren't accessing or surfacing information that they should not have access to. That's probably the biggest thing that takes time to get right.
Totally. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your questions and your attention. If you do have a question or you're interested in launching a pilot, certainly reach out, talk to your account manager, reach out to one of us. We'd be happy to talk through it and see if we can devise something that's right for you.